Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Apfordorf, and welcome to today's Professional Development Educator webinar, Turning Inquiry into Action, How to Engage Young Learners with KidCitizen. Some housekeeping items before we get started. First, for a smooth webinar experience today and to save bandwidth, we will not be using video for our speakers. We will be recording this program and will serve the recording as soon as we are able. As this event will be recorded, any questions or other participant contributions may be made publicly available as part of the library's archives. Participants for this live program are eligible for a certificate of participation certifying 1 hour, and we'll give you more information on that at the end of the program. You will have the opportunity to talk to each other and to the presenters via chat. As you do so, make sure you select all participants in the to box so that not only the presenters can see your chat, but also your colleagues. And feel free to start using that as you wish. Now on to today's program, Turning Inquiry into Action, How to Engage Young Learners with KidCitizen. Presenting this program will be Ilene R. Berson and Michael J. Berson from the University of South Florida. Cheryl Letterly from the Library of Congress will be supporting them in the chat. The session will highlight KidCitizen episodes that engage young children in analyzing resources from the Library of Congress and connecting what they learn to their daily lives. KidCitizen is a freely available digital interactive designed to foster young children's inquiry with primary sources. The digital episodes facilitate a developmentally appropriate process of careful looking, historical thinking, and evidence-informed analysis that are at the center of disciplinary literacy. By slowing down the act of looking, children discover new information and construct viewpoints as primary sources are mined. At this point, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Ilene and Michael Berson.
Thank you so much, Mike. We are so pleased to be here with the Library of Congress for this webinar today. I'm Michael Berson with Ilene Berson from the University of South Florida, and along with our colleague, Bert Snow from Snow & Co., we make up the KidCitizen team, and we're really excited to be sharing with you some of our information today.
So we want to take you on sort of exploring this process about introducing primary sources to our youngest learners. So learners who are in kindergarten, first, second, third grade, up into, all of the elementary years. And we recognize that one of the amazing opportunities that makes this so relevant and engaging for our young learners is because they are very curious. And through primary sources, it naturally lends itself to those formation of questions about wanting to explore and understand more about the world around them, utilizing the visual cues and evidence that they're presented with. So there's a process that we have studied over many years about how do we make this developmentally accessible to our youngest learners. And as I said already, young children are just inherently curious and interested in discovery and sort of making sense and meaning of the world around us. In fact, we know from research that they find that authentic images are much more compelling and interesting for them to spend their time on and to focus their attention to over cartoon versions of and representations of the world. And so we draw off of that inherent natural curiosity that they have to recognize those elements of the world that they see captured in primary sources that are familiar to them, so it draws them in to be able to sort of see those similarities with their own lived experiences, but also, even just as importantly, notice those distinctions of the things that represent change over time or differences across places and regions and people and families and how they live that then lead them to ask more questions and want to discover and learn more. So part of what this process of engaging with primary sources is to make these artifacts and these resources and these clues more than just sort of superficial representations that they quickly look at and then move on, but really engage them in a deep and deliberate and intentional exploration of the meaning that they can make from this information.
And this becomes a very important act for a teacher to really slow this process down and allow for deliberate looking, because in many cases we are privileging text, of course, in our classrooms, whether they're reading a textbook or other material. So taking that time and making an intentional effort to bring primary source imagery into the classroom is an important but thoughtful process. So this is one of the activities that we do, especially with our elementary and early childhood teachers, to get them to put primary sources, these artifacts, at the center of their curriculum. And this is an example using a primary source of a mail carrier who's a community helper, which is pretty much in the standards across the country, at the center. But how does this connect to various elements and aspects of the curriculum? For example, how does this primary source connect to thinking in mathematics, or science, or social studies, or language arts, or creative arts? So when we think about our planning and think about our work in this area, we sometimes try to start with an image and working with our teachers to create this sense of social studies at the center through a particular primary source.
So we're going to showcase with you about how we have utilized primary sources as both launching points for topics of discovery and inquiry with children, how we embed them as sort of the highlight of our lesson engagement and instruction, and how we also then utilize it to make extensions into subsequent areas of investigation with children.
So this is a front page from our website called KidCitizen, and some of you may have heard of this before, but if you haven't, KidCitizen is a primary source digital interactive that was developed through our team, a team that included school teachers, school supervisors, historians that actually engage in public history, as well as digital technologists, professors. And what we came up with is this digital interactive that is specifically geared for kindergarten through grade 5. Although we have had people, and we'll talk about this, that it can be used with English language learners in upper grades. But what this is a project that was supported by a grant from the Library of Congress, a grant entitled Congress Civic Participation and Primary Sources. And it allows that process of slow looking, the collecting of evidence and information to help us make decisions as children engage with primary sources. So it is based on a lot of research, strong research focus. Every turn, every decision that we've made in developing KidCitizen was based on exploring the research and grounding our work in the decision process in the research base. And as I mentioned, it's geared for children grades kindergarten through grade 5, but it is appropriate for some older children as well. The episodes engage children in exploring civics and government concepts through historical inquiry, but also trying to make those connections with their daily lives. And you'll see that as we approach that later on. So this is a little more information about KidCitizen that we're going to be highlighting an episode for you today and talking a little more in depth about that. But you can see that we have a vast array of episodes dealing with close looking. That's going to be coming soon. Close looking using a primary source from Japanese internment camps. We're going to be talking about today Rosa Parks, and in that episode, we're also getting ready to release a new episode on wondering with maps. And then we have a really exciting episode that deals with what is a primary source? I know that's a challenge even for many of us as adults, as teachers, but what does a primary source look like? We have something on community helpers, Congress and child labor, sourcing, which is extremely important with all of the information that our children are bombarded with, us as teachers, that we're bombarded with, how do we make sense of the source of a particular piece of information? Again, slowing down that looking, capture the flag, and then welcome to Congress. Who represents us in Congress? Everything is based on primary sources at the center. All of the episodes can be used on Macs, PCs, Chromebooks, iOS, Android, and everything is freely available and will remain freely available. We are working in a partnership with the University of Puerto Rico on the development of Spanish language versions of our episodes as well, and that's going to be an exciting feature to look forward to. So our KidCitizen pedagogy is based on the Harvard visual thinking model of see, think, and wonder. And it really goes along with that slowing down that process. So when you look at an image, what do you see? What are you thinking about? And what are you wondering? And that might take place all together, or it might take place in stages. But with the episodes, what we try to do is we try to lay out a process that slows that down, that gives the teacher and the students the opportunity to critically examine in a very thoughtful way the exploration of primary sources.
So one of the things that we'll be showcasing that happens within these episodes is that students collect clues as they go throughout the episode, and they collect them into a little history journal that they keep that's kind of up in the upper corner of the interactive itself. And then they utilize those clues to help sort of justify their conclusions that they're drawing at the end about what happened, in responding to this essential question that's really sort of guiding them through this inquiry to make sense about this historical resource and what meaning they can find. And so you can see that at the center of each one of our episodes is a photograph that features a resource that comes from the Library of Congress, and then we utilize other primary resources to help them discover more or make more sense or develop their conceptual knowledge and understanding about other things that they might be uncovering within here. One of the other things that you'll notice featured here on the left-hand corner of the screen is Ella. Ella is our mentor character who guides the children throughout the episode. She's there to sort of encourage them on, engage them in some critical thinking and questioning their rationale and their thought processes to help them really sort of go deeper with regard to their inquiry processes.
Ella, as Ilene mentioned, is a little bit older and she's a little bit sassy too. She really gets to know what we're talking about and really interacts well with the students as they're engaging in this process. One other thing we should mention too, unlike many interactives that are out there, we really chose not to use extrinsic types of motivation, stars and points. We really wanted to focus on the discovery process, that the children get motivated through the process of uncovering and unlocking historical secrets that help them answer that overarching question that they are asked.
And as the research tells us, and also we found in our own sort of implementation with younger learners, that actually is the most engaging process of this. So they're not doing it to be able to earn stars or earn points. They're doing it because they're just sort of excited about this ongoing process of active discovery and being engaged in this. So we're going to go ahead and sort of showcase to you sort of how we come into this process of designing an episode and make connections in really thoughtful and intentional ways with the curriculum that is showcased within the context of our classrooms. So whenever we walk into a classroom serving young children, particularly if we look in the primary grades, kindergarten, first, second, maybe into third grade, this concept of understanding family and the wonderful diversity of family structures, family experiences, but that we all bring part of our homes with us into the classrooms as a really critical element and a great way for us to draw on young children's funds of knowledge as a way to connect them into this process of meaningful inquiry-based learning. And so using that as a launching point, this sort of common experience of looking and reflecting on families and making sense of a family, we started off with talking with students in a classroom about what does it mean to be part of a family? What does family mean to you? So we had sort of a framework of their starting frames of reference. And here we have young Harrison. He was a 5-year-old who shared with us, some families are adults and kids, but some have only 2 people. Some have a girl and a boy. Some have 2 girls, and some have 2 boys. It doesn't matter if 2 boys or 2 girls get married. Everybody's different. If they're all the same, it's boring. So, that was, sort of this wonderful perspective of 5-year-old Harrison about sharing sort of his way of thinking about families. And of course, each child had their own personal experience about what it meant to be part of a family. And the one common denominator, regardless of sort of the diversity of their family backgrounds and experience, that they all came up with was that being part of a family was with a group of people who love and care for one another. And there's lots of different ways that we showcase and share that sense of loving and caring for one another. And that really was a lot of our impetus in thinking about how we were going to put together this particular episode that was going to focus in on the historical thinking skill of analysis. So as Michael said, many of our other episodes, and I should say most of our episodes, if they're sort of more in-depth episodes, to be played through in about 15 minutes, maybe 17 minutes if you have a very excited and rambunctious sort of group of students who have lots of different ideas that they want to share. But typically a playthrough lasts around 15 minutes for our longer episodes. Our shorter sort of snack-sized ones can be played through in about 5 minutes or so, just to give background exposure. But this is one of our more intensive ones where we are taking students through a process of collecting those clues for the purposes of analyzing this resource. We're going to introduce you to this primary source in just a moment, that is connected to Rosa Parks, but a different sort of exploration around Rosa Parks, not sort of the typical way that Rosa Parks is talked about in the classroom. This is Rosa Parks as a daughter, Rosa Parks as a loving member of her family who has in common with these children this sort of connection with loved ones and demonstrating caring for those who make up this sort of important group of people in our lives.
So what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through what's called a playthrough of the episode. And as we mentioned, at the KidCitizen site, you can find all of our episodes. But what we've done is to help move along and allow us to talk about the process of KidCitizen, we've created a playthrough for you. So normally, you'd be able to play through this yourself.
So before I go ahead and I kind of click start on this, and this is kind of what you would see if you go to the KidCitizen site, and to be able to sort of use this in your classroom, you don't have to sign in or log in. There's no codes. Students don't have to be assigned any access points. You literally can go in and hit start and begin interacting with the episode.
And based on our research that we've been doing with KidCitizen over the past few years, we found that the best way to start with a KidCitizen episode is usually a whole class or a small group type of instruction. This allows the children to get familiar with the episode, and then later on, they can play through the episode by themselves. But it also gives the teacher a sense of this whole discussion that can take place, and then the students, of course, have the opportunity to explore and come up with new levels of understanding on their own.
And that's a really important point with our younger learners in this initial introduction into primary source inquiry, to provide those opportunities, first of all, for shared conversation in the classroom context, either whole group or small group instruction, so that they can hear this sharing of ideas. It also provides educators an opportunity to provide necessary scaffolding, maybe introduce vocabulary or recognize and identify concepts that will need to be revisited and reintroduced to help them further develop their both conceptual understanding as well as their historical inquiry skills as they go forward. And then this could become a learning center in the computer corner where a couple of students could then go back and revisit the episode and go through it together and have a shared conversation, or even at home with a homeschool connection that they could continue being able to play through with their family and showcase some of their learning in class. So we're just going to go ahead and start. There will be points where we're going to jump ahead just to kind of, as Michael said, allow us to sort of get to certain elements to be able to showcase to you in the context of this episode.
Tap Start to begin. Hi, my name is Ella, and I am standing in front of a photo of a young child presenting a special greeting card to a famous actor. People send greeting cards for many reasons. Tap on the photo and we'll look at some cards from long ago.
So one of the things that we just want to kind of highlight right from the get-go is that you'll notice that there's a lot of intentionality with the kinds of primary sources that are selected to really be most engaging for our young learners. And one of the things that sort of helps us create this sort of sense of engagement and connection, like we said, we look for there to be elements about something that might be familiar, but then also bring in elements that are a surprise or can foster that sense of wondering. And so the featuring of a young child here is a very intentional element about introducing this concept that we're going to be talking about greeting cards, that greeting cards are going to be an important element. Now, we recognize that we can't take for granted anymore that children have an authentic lived experience about what it's like to get greeting cards in the mail. We know in our own lives, maybe in your lives, we're all sending everything sort of through the email and digital versions now. And so we want to make sure that we first provide a little bit of scaffolding about when we're talking about greeting cards, what they look like, what they are, and that there's different kinds of greeting cards. So this is an area that you also in the class could sort of make some additional, as Michael talked about, all of the additional interdisciplinary touch points when we're teaching in the elementary curriculum. We look for a lot of those connections, whether it's with our language arts curriculum, science, and mathematics. So this is one of those wonderful, powerful opportunities to make very strong connections in our language arts curriculum and talking and introducing about greeting cards.
There are many different kinds of cards that come in lots of shapes and sizes. Each card is folded and has a front cover. The front of the card may have pictures and words. You can open the card to see inside. Tap on the arrow below the card to open it up and look inside. Inside the card, there may be a message for a special occasion. Tap the arrow below the open card and see what happens. You have closed it and are looking at the back of the card.
So this gives the students the opportunity to really explore the card in depth. And notice how we really slow down their looking. It's a very deliberate process that a card has parts, a front, a middle, and a back. And in this particular case, you're going to notice also that there were a few cards featured. All of those cards are part of the Rosa Parks collection at the Library of Congress.
So that's another part of this common theme. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to just jump a little bit, but we'll start off each one of the episodes once we kind of provide some initial scaffolding with a compelling or essential question that is going to be sort of guiding the focus of our inquiry and the kinds of things that we're going to be exploring for looking for clues.
Tap on it to take a closer look. We will do more than just look with our eyes. We are going to use our brains and think about what the clues mean. When you think about the clues, you are like a history detective that is figuring out what we can learn about a family from long ago, who they are, and what feelings they were expressing. Why would someone select this card to send to a family member or friend? Let's explore the card and see what evidence we find to help us answer this question.
So our essential question is, why would we send this card? And you're going to see in this episode, and again, because of our time today, we're going to skim ahead a little bit, but why would someone send a card like that? So we're going to be dealing with not only looking at this as a primary source, but also exploring issues around socio-emotional aspects of why would this card be important, the terminology that's used, the feelings that it evokes.
So Ella's going to go through and start off with the front of the card, right? So we've got lots of evidence and lots of clues and lots of information here. And so starting off with sort of the more visually, sort of aesthetically pleasing elements around this different colored flowers. And so we have the students go ahead and tap on flowers, begin collecting them based on colors, and then they're going to collect them into their researcher journal. So we want to feature what it looks like to collect something into the researcher journal.
The yellow flowers, and help me collect this clue for our researcher journal. Yes, these are yellow flowers.
So just the way that a historian works is they're going through an archive or a database, they're collecting pieces of evidence. As we go through this process, not just in this episode, but in our other episodes as well, we collect evidence, or the student collects evidence, to keep in the researcher journal to help them make decisions as they progress through unveiling that information about the card. Why would someone send this card?
So we introduce other terms like what a wheelbarrow is, a rake, and we begin introducing some of those other elements. And we also, this is what it looks like inside the researcher journal as they go through and they begin collecting these visual clues that they'll be utilizing later on as part of their analysis process. So we're going to go back to the front of the card. And one of the other things, once they've sort of looked at some of the visual aesthetics of the card, is then we begin focusing on the fact that there's actually text that is represented here too. And we want to begin exploring this idea about what these words mean. And so we have them go ahead and tap on the words.
So that we can take a closer look.
As Ella said, take a closer look. So we want to zoom in. And now let's look at this and focus in.
These words say, with love from your daughter.
Now you can see that Ella's going ahead and reading it to our children who are utilizing and engaging in the episode, because we don't want them to be hindered by not yet developing their literacy skills, their early literacy skills, not being at a stage yet where they can actually read this independently. So she's going to help scaffold that. If they can read this independently, wonderful, but if not, that's not in any way going to impede them to be able to engage with it.
Let's look at the words to see what clues we can find to help us solve our mystery of who sent the card. Find the word daughter. Tap on it to save it to your journal.
Now, in this particular case, because this is a playthrough, we're selecting, for the most part, correct answers. So it gets saved. But if, for example, one of the students selected an incorrect answer, Ella's not going to necessarily say no. She might say, are you sure? And then provide clues or hints to help in the process.
Right. So in this case, she might sit there and say, daughter begins with the letter D. Find the letter D. So again, helping to scaffold those early literacy skills as a child goes through this. Once they identify sort of a word like daughter, we're now going to create a greater challenge of the task and recognize that we've got some words that are not written in print text, but they are written in sort of a more cursive form of writing. And so we ask them to find the word love. And this can be a bit more challenging.
Tap on the word love.
Again, we'll
Cursive
scaffold
writing
it.
can be tricky to read since the letters are looped and connected together. There are 4 letters in the word love. Let's try to match each cursive letter with the matching print letter.
So this is a really interesting process. As we were doing the research behind the development of this episode, we started really thinking about the treasure trove of primary sources at the Library of Congress that older students could explore that are written in cursive. The problem is that in many cases, children are not scaffolded from an early age on how to explore primary sources using cursive writing. So this was a great way as a building block, in a sense, to further development with primary sources as children even get older.
So I'm going to sort of jump us a little bit ahead here. We're going to, after we get done with this section of the card, We're going to then move into the middle section of the card. And so we have them go here where there's now a poem. And it's a very similar process. We're going to help them start off. What are some of the things now that look familiar, right? So we start off with the flowers. We found flowers on the front of the card, find flowers here. So we have something connected. We also have a word that appeared on the front of the card that they may also, a couple words they may recognize, like daughter and love. And so we're going to engage them in some additional scaffolding. And part of that scaffolded process is introducing this poem that's now here in the center that conveys some ideas. And again, to help them make sense of the words and the information that are here, we take them through a very slow process. We want to get to the back of the card, because the back of the card is a really, really compelling element of this, because this is a handwritten note that Rosa Parks wrote to her mother as part of this greeting card that she was exchanging. So this is really where, now that we've taken you through this slow, sort of gradual process of investigating this primary source, now here we come to this real challenge, the real curiosity. What does this note say?
The card's great, but looking at the card from the standpoint of Rosa Parks in her own words makes it an extremely powerful primary source.
Written letter. A letter allows someone to share ideas and information, as well as express feelings to another person. Let's see what this special note says. Tap the card and I'll read it. Dear Mother, how are you?
So what Ella's going to do is, and you're going to notice that print text is coming up with highlighting as the cursive writing is being read. And that, again, is a mechanism to help scaffold for our younger learners so that they can have access to the content here. But all of their analysis is going to take place with the cursive handwritten note, utilizing the print text as a scaffolded support for them as they go through. And so we ask them to go ahead and collect some additional clues based on the information that they're finding here. So finding things like the word mother, the word daughter, the name of the person who sent this. So identifying at the very bottom, Rosa, and we again provide scaffolding here as you go through the whole process. And you can see here's an example where we give a hint. Here's another hint, find line 14, and daughter's the last word on that line. So you'll see numbers come up as a scaffolding to support children who might be struggling to identify in the cursive writing, sort of how to locate some of these words. So after they've collected all of these different clues, we're going to take them back into the researcher journal, because we want them to be able to utilize this in a way to be able to make sense of the information that they've had.
And again, using all of this evidence that's collected in the researcher journal, we're going to ask them about the questions related to the socio-emotional aspect of this card.
And feelings. You have looked carefully and found many clues that may be important or interesting. Think about what you have observed. What feeling do you think this card expresses? Tap on the image that matches the feeling communicated by the card.
So in this particular case, you're going to see the smiley faces across the bottom, and you might be asking yourself, well, they kind of look all the same. How do I know which one to choose? And that's the point, that when you read a card from someone, you might have a lot of different emotions based on who sent you the card, how you're feeling at that point in time. So realistically, any one of those three choices could be correct based on how you're feeling. And we're really trying to elevate and respect the voices and the feelings of our young learners as they're exploring this.
Right, so it's not about like you get the correct emotion conveyed, it's that you can justify or substantiate with the evidence what your selection was.
You think that the card was chosen to make someone feel loved. Choose 2 clues you collected that tell us why you think so. and drop them on the face you choose. The wheelbarrow is filled with lots of flowers to show how strong the feelings are. The greetings on the inside of the card started with, Mother Dearest.
So now we wanted them to also use their clues to be able to figure
One
out.
of the people in this photo sent the card to the other person. Let's first figure out who these people are. We have two words that you collected from the card, mother and daughter. Drag the words to the two boxes to identify who is the mother and who is the daughter. Yes, that is the mother. That's a match. You identified the daughter in the photo. Now that you figured out who is the mother and who is the daughter, tap on the person in the photo who sent the card. This is Rosa Parks, the person who signed her name to the card. Now tap on the person in the photo who received the card. This is Leona Macaulay, Rosa's mother. Why was the card sent? What is being celebrated? One of these three cards is for the same occasion. Which one do you think it is? Tap on it. This is a Get Well card that friends sent to Rosa. Keep looking for a match for the special event that Rosa was celebrating with her mother. Great thinking. This is a Mother's Day card that Rosa sent to her mother during a different year. It also has flowers.
So now we have this sort of conclusionary overview to review what they had focused in on, that they analyzed this greeting card. They learned that Rosa Parks was a loving daughter who was proud of her mother, that she had sent this card to her, and that there's lots of different reasons why that people send cards over time. We also, of course, celebrate Rosa Parks as a courageous person who stood up to make sure all people were treated fairly. And that in the same way that Rosa sent cards to her mother, she's also received cards from children to thank her for her courage. And we go back to some of those initial cards and looking from the Rosa Parks collection about her children celebrating how brave she was and their appreciation for her experiences over time.
If you have some time in an opportunity to explore the Rosa Parks collection at the Library of Congress, you will find a true treasure trove of the many different cards that she has received.
So one of the things that we really also do, as we said, we utilize these interactives as ways to link into other elements within the context of the curriculum. So part of that linkages is the linkages about sort of the diversity of families and the diversity of family structures. We also do it as a way to help us engage in presenting a counter narrative to the Rosa Parks myth. You know, sort of this identity of Rosa Parks from this sort of exceptionalist orientation and giving children this opportunity to explore her as a long-standing person who is committed to issues of social justice and standing up when she encountered issues that she felt needed to be changed. But she did that as part of a community, that there were many others who joined her in those efforts. And so we bring in other primary sources in to introduce children both about sort of this concept of learning about greeting cards from the Rosa Parks collection, but also about Rosa Parks herself. And of course, a critical element when we're doing and developing primary source inquiry for young children is we recognize that their historical background knowledge is still emerging and still developing. And so a great context for us to be able to further build upon their conceptual knowledge and historical background is by bringing in children's literature. But we're very intentional in looking at how representations of people are conveyed in that children's literature, and so really showcasing representations that contribute to this sort of deeper focus on inquiry and representation?
So we've also have accessible on the KidCitizen site for every episode a teacher's guide. And the teacher's guide is a great resource that specifically provides our teachers with some background about the episode. It gives you the overarching story, what this episode is all about, the essential question, what do greeting cards tell us about families, who they are, and the feelings that they express to one another. There are a lot of connections that can be made, those curricular connections that we talked about earlier, connected to the C3 framework as well. And then also here's the section on a short but powerful historical background.
And this historical background is written for educators. This is to ensure that you have a background knowledge that you may not have had an opportunity, depending upon what the focus is of the episode, to develop, so that you can further engage your students by developing your own background knowledge and information, along with additional resources to help sort of inform you to be able to become more knowledgeable about Rosa Parks in this particular case. We're going to kind of scoot down into this teacher's guide. And we should say on the website, just like the episodes, the teacher's guides are freely accessible. The only thing that we ask if you're going to download the teacher's guide is to provide us with your zip code, just so that we can track sort of where the country people are accessing those materials. And that's only for the teacher's guide that we ask for that kind of information. You'll see in the teacher's guide, we'll also give you direct links to every primary source that appears within the interactive episode. And that's for several purposes. For the purposes of you as a teacher who may want to differentiate for learners in your classroom who need to or would benefit from having hard copies of the primary sources, or if you're doing that whole group instruction and you have one child coming up to the interactive whiteboard to do the sort of the touching and the selection, then the others could still be engaging in sort of a close looking and an inquiry with their own copy at their tables or at their desks or on the floor, circle time, or however you structure it, so that they can have their own exposure. And you can also utilize these for other activities in the class too. So like we have all of the links to the different kinds of greeting cards, along with recommendations about other extensions of learning experiences that you could build on as part of your curriculum that are all tied into this particular episode.
And again, these are just great resources that you can use as standalone, as part, or extensions of this. And you can see here the bus cards as well. We also have some suggestions for teachers. We have lesson plans and other resources that you can access based on some of the books that we had mentioned, to really extend this not only into a singular activity around an episode, but really expand it into a really nice unit that you could use with your students, talking about Rosa Parks and extending it beyond her work as well. And then we have some related articles and books that you can explore about Rosa Parks to really help you have a good, solid, grounded understanding in Rosa Parks, as well as the children's literature that we mentioned earlier. And as Ilene mentioned, all of those are accessible on the KidCitizen site and freely accessible, and will remain freely accessible as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some applications of this. And before we do that, just want to mention too that on July 29th at this same time, the Library of Congress summer webinars is going to focus on the Rosa Parks in Her Own Words exhibit. And as two individuals who had an opportunity to visit the Library of Congress and the exhibit, it is totally worth it. You will really find out a lot of exciting information that you can use to enhance your understanding.
So sort of the essential element for any form of learning when we are working with primary sources is for children not just to develop their historical inquiry skills, but to be able to build upon those knowledge and those process skills to then take action in their own lives. And so we really look for ways that we can structure and design experiences that connect to these learning of the things that they've learned about in these primary sources. So we're going to showcase one classroom that did just that, building off of this interactive episode to then other areas of inquiry that it fostered. And so this is really connected to about children having their voices and agency to be able to represent their ideas. So in this particular classroom, the children in learning more, it had questions, and they, after doing this interactive episode, were really curious to learn more about Rosa Parks and about her work. And then also because they felt so connected about feeling this commonality of also being people who have families and people that they care and love about, asking questions about experiences in their community that they felt needed attention and that they wanted to bring other people's attention to. And that particular episode in the context of this class was one of the children who, upon coming back from Target, had shared her experience there, that she found that the toy section was still very much segregated based on gender. So, it was sort of the blue and the pink sections of the toy set. And she said, I wonder why that is. And other children also had a shared experience with that. And they thought that somebody should really do something about that. And actually, they were the somebodies who could do something about that. They had the agency. But before they could do something about that, they said that they really needed to understand, well, how do you go about making change? How do you do these things? And so in the context of this classroom, this was then a launch point to bring in other primary sources to learn about what does it mean to protest. And this actually took place toward the end of last year. So, with our current setting, this is a very relevant area of inquiry that many children are asking questions and really interested in learning more about what does it mean to protest. But we spent time with the children in this classroom to help them be able to develop a better understanding about what does it mean to protest? What do you need if you're going to have a protest? And so in looking at primary sources, they noticed things like, well, people carry signs when they're protesting. Sometimes you'll see somebody has a flag, or they might be wearing buttons, and you see large groups of people who are all together. They also noticed that sometimes as part of protests that people will have a petition and they'll utilize it. And what they learned about the reason for that was because they want to show that other people are supporting their cause and want to show that there's a shared sort of mass of individuals who want to see change come about.
So these images and primary sources are from the Library of Congress collection, and they're wonderful to explore as well.
And so you can see here we've got a few of the children who are sharing some of their initial inquiries. And so looking at a variety of different images of people engaged in protests. And here's Leandro saying, that lady's mouth is open. That means she's yelling. I see raindrops. So maybe they're protesting about water. Their hands are up. So maybe they're shouting with their hands up about water. Hey, I see lots of water. And teacher said, yes, I see that too, Leandro. Lots of signs with water droplets on them. And here's Avery, who noted, in this picture, I only see women. I don't even see one boy. Teacher noted, that was a great observation. No boys in this protest either. And he was like, I don't really know, but I see that they're holding signs. What does the sign say? Ms. Jordan said, votes for women. And Avery said, I want to write women on the picture, but I don't know how to spell it. So this was sort of like this idea about trying to make sense, collect clues. So they were utilizing all these strategies that they had developed in the interactive episode now to make sense and learn about this idea of protest.
And notice in the Rosa Parks episode that we just shared with you, we showed you a technique called zooming in, and the children had magnifying glasses, which allowed them to zoom in and do some close looking with an image.
So similar to how in the Rosa Parks episode, we talked about bringing in children's literature to help develop their background knowledge and understanding and concept development, the same thing in learning about this idea of protest, that we sat there and brought in additional children's literature to help them understand about different forms of protest, and that they could then match up what they had seen in the primary sources with also the representations in the children's literature. So here you're now going to see a little bit, just a little snippet of their enactment of then them taking action of actually having a protest outside their school to be able to bring about change. And so what they're asking for is they're asking for no longer to be gender-specific sections in the toy section at the stores, and to have one section for all.
One section for all! 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 One section for all!
What they also did was, because they liked this idea of a petition and showing that other people were also similarly engaged in their cause, and so what they did was they captured signatures from people who came and observed or took part in their protests, and then they utilized this as a math activity as well, counting up all of the signatures, and they found that they had a grand total of 140 signatures, and then drafted a letter along with their signatures, along with their protest demands, and sent it to the Target store to be able to get some feedback. So we have, generally just sort of these recommendations, which basically at the end of the day is really about the fact that young learners have not just a capability to engage in primary source inquiry, but it's actually a wonderful opportunity to connect with their inherent curiosity and simultaneously develop their interest in historical thinking, but also this early foundation of historical thinking and analysis, utilizing the development of these social studies concepts to also connect to their civic engagement as young learners. And this is a critical time in these early years for teachers to build off of these sort of learning opportunities so that children can, beginning again in the early years, intentionally work toward contesting bias and inequities that they are very much attending to, but finding strategies and opportunities, learning from history, applying it to their lives today to be able to cultivate the discrimination-free communities that stand up, where they become upstanders within the context of their communities.
So one of the things as a last closing comment is to make sure that if you have not been able to explore the TPS Teachers Network, KidCitizen actually has a group on the TPS Teachers Network, and it's a wonderful place to share ideas and information, and I think you'll find it extremely worthwhile.
Again, this is a free professional learning community. Lots of different people interested in utilizing primary sources are part of this group. KidCitizen is amongst one of the subgroups that you can find there.
We also have a program called KidCitizen Editor, and that is a program that's freely accessible to you as teachers, where you can design your own episodes based on primary sources that might be regionally or personally specific to your school or your community. And you could create even your own characters, your own voiceover. And that's something available through the KidCitizen project.
So we encourage you to go to kidcitizen.net to share episodes with your students, access the teacher's guide, learn more about the pedagogy, and also if you are interested in finding out more about the KidCitizen editor, to be able to engage in that as well. And I think we may have time for a question or two, and we'll send it back to Mike.
Hey, thank you, Ilene and Michael, for a wonderful overview of a KidCitizen, and also for all your great insights in working with young learners. It's truly inspirational. We do have time for Q&A, but for anyone who has to scoot quickly, Cheryl just put in the chat window a link to our survey, and we encourage you that before you leave, click on that survey link and let us know what you thought. Additionally, if you would like a certificate for 1 hour of PD for this session, shoot me an email. You can see Cheryl put the link or the email in the chat, mapf@loc.gov. send me that within the next 48 hours, and we'll get you your certificate. With that said, I think Cheryl's been tracking the questions. Do you want to read a few of them for Ilene and Michael, and we can take as many as we can?
Absolutely. So the first question I saw was, Michael and Ilene, do you test each new activity with student users?
Oh, wonderful question. So yes, we have a wonderful cadre of children who are our sort of beta users to let us know sort of how they react and respond to the episodes, areas that we need to go back and clarify, and also help us give additional guidance to teachers and bring it into the classroom.
And like any new technology, we create various versions. So for example, if we find something that's not working, we make modifications and changes based on the research that we're doing.
Thank you. Another participant asked, when will your MAPS episode be available?
So that's a great question. We are really excited about the MAPS episode. That has something called, as a little bit of a hint, it has a preview in a sense, a wondering tree. And the technology behind it has taken us a little bit longer, but we actually have a beta that we've been looking at with some different stakeholder groups and children as well, and we should have that out hopefully this summer.
Right, by the latter part of the summer, along with a teacher's guide that'll accompany it.
And along those same lines, Emily asks, how often do new episodes come out?
So that's a little bit of a trickier question. Generally, we have a few episodes that come out each year, but depending on the sophistication of the technology, it might take us a little bit longer with some.
But an exciting opportunity for anybody who's interested with KidCitizen is that in the early fall, we're going to be asking teachers to submit ideas for our next episodes that we're going to be designing.
And that will be announced in the TPS Teachers Network. So that's something definitely to look forward to in the fall.
Terrific. And I see a couple of questions that are loosely related. One question is, are they tablet enabled? And then Leah has a really specific question about, do the episodes adhere to accessibility guidelines, because her state must meet web content accessibility guidelines, a long string of letters.
Absolutely. So in response to the question about being tablet enabled, yes, any device that can connect to the web can access KidCitizen episodes, so no problems there. Depending, because we know that different states have different levels of specificity with regard to universal design. We have taken that into consideration with regard to our design to meet sort of general framework. But if there are elements that need additional scaffolding or support, we invite people to reach out and let us know, and we're happy to see if we can work in concert with you to ensure that level of accessibility.
Thank you. Mike, I see we are exactly at the top of the hour, and we want to be respectful of people's time. I think I've caught all the questions, so if somebody put in a question and I didn't ask it out loud already, please do put it in the chat again, and we do recognize that some of you may have to leave. But Mike, I'm going to mute myself so you can do any necessary wrap-ups.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I really have nothing further. I just mentioned that if you would like to email me the question, if you didn't get your question answered, I will make sure to get that to Ilene and Michael, and you can contact me at mapf@loc.gov, and I will make sure we can get your question into the right hands and get answered. I do thank everyone for stopping by today and joining us for this presentation, and thank you, Ilene and Michael, for spending your time with us as well. Everyone have a great evening, and we'll see you all soon.